Hi everyone, my name is Zoe. Welcome to my first ever YouTube video. Today I wanted to share how I've been using both the Hobonichi Cousin and the Hobonichi Weeks as my functional planners for the first half of 2025. I'm going to start with the Cousin, which I've been using as my personal planner, and I will get into the Weeks, which I've been using as a work planner later on in the video. And I'm just going to jump right into it. I don't do anything with the front pages here. I also don't do anything with the yearly calendar here. I never find myself flipping back to this page, so I don't even bother trying to track anything. For the yearly index, I first started the year trying to use this as a habit tracker, ended up bailing on that idea after about a week, which is why I've just put a sticky note over it so I could repurpose it for something else. So instead, I turned this into a kind of health log where I was keeping track of the amount of hours that I slept each day, if I was on my period, if I exercised, and if I had a migraine that day. And I continued with that for about a month and a half until, again, I bailed on it. I just would keep forgetting that this page existed, and I fell off of doing it enough times that I just kind of gave up after a little bit. And the only other things I've noted here are a couple pages where I know I'm going to want to reference them again in the future. Like on these pages in January, I've swatched all of my markers and highlighters and things like that. But other than that, I don't really see myself coming back and trying to repurpose these pages because I know myself. I know I do not come back and check these very often, so they're probably just going to stay blank for the rest of the year. Moving into the monthly calendars, as you can see, my style is very plain, very bare bones. I would just write down appointments, reminders, events, birthdays, things like that. But again, I found myself really not referencing this page very often. Like I would set it up on the first of every month and then would really never flip back to it unless I had an appointment to add, which isn't very often, clearly. So I was trying to come up with another idea to use this page more frequently. So for March, I tried something new where I put my sleep log off to the side here instead of at the front of the book. And then I also tried a sort of habit tracking where I assigned a different color to each habit that I wanted to keep track of or a health-related symptom that I also wanted to monitor. And then I would color in corresponding boxes on each day, whether I completed something or had a symptom or whatever it may be. And my idea was to be able to get a snapshot view of the whole month and see how successful I was with my habits. But this is just honestly quite hard to parse through. It's a lot of information that is not very easily legible. Like, for example, my reading habit, I'm really not getting a good overview of how much I read in March just because there's so much going on with so many different colors. So for the next month, I refined this a little bit, and I did attempt the sleep log for about a week and a half before I gave up on that. I moved the habits down to the bottom of the page and just did it horizontally like this. And I think this is obviously much easier to parse through, where I can see I was successful with some habits and unsuccessful with others. And then as far as the individual days went, I moved to just tracking one habit on each day, and that was my workouts for the day. So if I didn't work out, it was a rest day, or if I did work out, I would write down exactly what I did that day, which gives me a little bit more info than just checking off like, yeah, I did work out. So I really like this layout, and you're probably noticing that it drops off about halfway through the month. That's because at this point, I was getting really into digital planning, which didn't end up sticking. But that is why the second half of this month is just completely blank because I had switched systems. But this is my favorite use of the monthly layouts so far, and the rest of my months look pretty similar to this, so I'm just gonna move on to the weeklies from here. And now that we're in the weeklies, it's probably relevant for me to mention that my job is as a freelance video editor for other YouTubers, actually. So even though I said this is my first YouTube video, I'm very familiar with YouTube as a platform. I've edited hundreds of videos at this point, probably, so this is just the first one that I have made for myself. But that is why when you look at my schedule here, the working hours are so inconsistent. It's just because I am a freelancer and I get to choose my own hours. So there's definitely no traditional 9 to 5 kind of schedule going on here. So just wanted to throw that out there for some context. On the sidebar here, I use this as a running to-do list for the week. So things that I know I want to get done that week, but don't have to be done on a specific day. And then at the bottom here, I was keeping track of my sleep that I eventually transferred over into the front of my planner. And as far as the actual week goes, I would put all day events at the top. So if it was a birthday or a holiday, anything like that would go in this empty space up here. And then I have different colors to mean different things as far as my time tracking goes. So I have a dark blue for sleep, black is for everyday tasks, green is for work, teal is for a Stardew project that I was trying to do that I didn't end up finishing, But yeah, I really like this system because I can just get a view of how I spent my time that week at a glance. It's helpful for work because, I'm keeping track of my hours for clients, but also it's helping keep me accountable in terms of if I'm procrastinating on something, like on this day here, I played a bunch of Stardew before getting into work. I can look at that and be like, okay, I need to make some changes so that I don't allow myself to procrastinate like that again. And again, for some context, I am somebody who has ADHD, so I need to keep on top of that, maybe more than the average person does. So that is why I stuck to this system for most of the first half of 2025. It just worked really well for my brain and keeping me accountable. And so as the year went on, I tried to make it a little bit prettier. You can see here, it's still the same general idea of keeping track of my time and color coding things, but it's just a little bit more legible here with the bars instead of just the lines. And I have censored some things for work just for privacy reasons if the video isn't public yet. But yeah, same general idea as before. I had swapped out the sleep log for a habit tracker at some point here. I just found that was a better use of the space down here. But as you can see, still pretty consistent as far as what I'm actually tracking day to day. And this week in April here is actually the last week that I did this time tracking. You can see I didn't even finish Sunday, but I did want to clarify, if you've never done time tracking before, this may seem really intimidating, but I promise you, I'm not sitting there timing myself being like, oh my gosh, it took me exactly 36 minutes to eat my breakfast today. I would just generally check the time whenever I was switching tasks. So that's how I filled in these days. And as you can see, sometimes I just wrote one big time chunk for something. Like I spent all day decluttering, but I wasn't sitting here being like, okay, from exactly 11 a.m. to 12, I decluttered the kitchen. I just generally want to know what I was doing throughout the day. I don't need exact timestamps by the minute of when I was doing everything. And so I did say that this is the last week that I did this time tracking. As you can see, I've got quite a few empty pages here, and that's because, again, I had moved into digital planning at this point. And then when I eventually did pick up on paper planning again, I moved into a different method of using these weekly pages, which was this more dashboard style layout. I just found that I was over time tracking. I didn't feel like it was benefiting me at this point. So I decided to go for something else where the top half of the page is day specific things. So events that day, like birthdays, what exercise I did that day, and then the top 3 priorities that I wanted to get done that day. And then the bottom of the page, I was just using as kind of scratch pad for whatever. You can see here, I have some lists of work things that I was doing, personal things I wanted to get done that week, and then mandated fun, which sounds a little ridiculous, but I'm somebody who can just kind of get lost in whatever I'm doing, especially if I'm busy with work. And I sometimes need reminders to take time for myself and have some fun if I'm not really in the habit of doing that. So wrote down a couple things I maybe wanted to do that week, got around to one of them, that's okay. And more recently, I have been using a similar layout, but much more health focused. So at the top here, I keep track of the weather and then the sleep that I get every day, what exercise I did that day. I didn't work out at all this week, but whatever, that's fine. What food I was eating each day, my energy levels throughout the day, and then if I had any symptoms or any migraines, I also wanted to keep track of that here. And along the sidebar, I was using that to keep track of my medications because some I do need to take every day, some are on an as-needed basis. So just wanting to keep a record of when did I actually take these medications. That's how I've been using the weeklies more recently. So from here, I'm going to move into the dailies. And so on this page, I've just censored some journaling, but you can get a general idea of how I was using my pages. So at the top of the page here, where you have these 5 little checkboxes, I would just section that off and write in my top priority of the day. And I would always write today's frog, like the eat the frog method. The biggest, baddest thing on my to-do list for the day, I would always put that at the top. And then if I completed it, I would color in the box and write an X. And if I didn't complete it, I wouldn't color in the box. So at a glance, when flipping through these pages, I can see how successful I was at actually getting my priority for the day done. And then as far as the rest of the page goes, I kind of sectioned it off into 3 different areas. So I use the timeline as an actual timeline and label when I was doing things. And this is exactly the same information that's in my weeklies. But my usual process throughout the day is I will have my planner open on my desk, flat like this all day, and I'll just mark things in the timeline as I complete them so that I don't have to flip back and forth between pages. I can just stay on this spread all day. Because part of ADHD for me is that if I'm not looking at something, it doesn't exist. Out of sight, out of mind. So in order for me to get the best use out of my planners, I need to have them open in front of me all day, which I have the benefit of working from home, so I can do that but I understand that is not everyone's situation, but that is just how I personally use my planners. So I would keep track of what I was doing on the timeline here, and then off to the right, I would write down my tasks for the day or events or notes. I am somebody who bullet journaled for years and years in the past, so I still use that key where I would write a dot for a task and then exit off if I completed it, an arrow to the right if I moved it forward, a dash for a note, and then I do a star for all-day events like birthdays and holidays. And then at the bottom of the page, I would usually fill that with journaling if I felt like I had anything to say. Some days I did, some days I didn't. And I was not too worried about having to fill up the whole page every day, because for me, my planner is here to serve me. I'm not here to serve my planner. So if I don't get around to filling up pages, it's not something that I worry about. And I'm not somebody who uses these monthly cover pages. I just find that without the actual grid on this page, I really am not able to use it for much. So it just stays blank for me. And then sometime mid-February, I did change up my layout quite a bit. So instead of doing my frog of the day at the top, I started tracking different things. So the hours I slept, my water intake, if I exercised, and then also as a media tracker. So if I read anything or watched anything. So I really like this use of this space at the top because it's really easy for me to flip through my pages and grab that information off the page really easily without having to scan through the rest of the page looking for what chapters of a book I read that day. And then off to the timeline here, I stopped actually labeling how I was spending my time, but I still kept lines going down the timeline of the day. Hopefully that made sense. It's still the same color coordination where I have a dark blue for sleep, black for different household things or general errands, whatever. And I would just have to basically run to the weeklies and fill them out at the end of every day while I still remembered what these different lines represented, which I don't know why I chose to torture myself like that, but I did. And so instead of labeling how I was spending my time over here, I used this space to keep track of a new routine that I was trying to build at the time. And I ended up calling that Dailies, which is like a video game term. And as you can see, I would write out the same exact thing every day, which I'm sure to most people seems really laborious and like, why are you wasting your time doing that? For me, it was really helpful in terms of establishing this routine. It helped me be really intentional. So if I keep writing down that I want to draw every day, but I don't, then at some point I'm going to ask myself, is it worth it to keep writing down? Or if I do want to keep writing it down, if this is a habit I'm trying to build, then I should be also spending the time to actually do the thing and not just writing it down every day. Hopefully that makes sense. I know that's definitely not everyone's thing, but it's what worked for me for a long time. So that's what I did. And I'm not usually someone who decorates my planners, but sometimes I'd stick some ephemera in. Like I had got a jet pencil here and I pasted in that sticker. And then sometimes you get a little comic on your shipping label. So I pasted that in here as well. And then flipping into March here, I just wanted to show off this page as another way that you could track your time if that's something that you're interested in. And I believe I first saw this on the actual Hobonichi website. And the idea is that every single box here can represent 5 minutes of your time. So this is 6 o'clock, this would be 6 to 6:05, 6:05 to 6:10, so on and so forth. And then you can just color in each box according to how you spent that time. So this is just another way to track your time. It's not something that I ended up sticking with. I even wrote down that I did not like tracking my time like that, but I just figured I'd show it off as an example of some way that you could use this space in your planner. And then further on into March, I was finding myself wanting to get a little bit more creative with my planner. So I started to incorporate more sketches into my days. Like I got a new bag here, I got a jet pens order. So at this point, I'm still definitely using this primarily as a functional planner, but if I did end up having extra space at the end of the day, I would sometimes fill it with a little bit of memory keeping. And so jumping ahead into April here, you can see that I actually stopped tracking things at the top of the page because I did actually end up getting a separate Hobonichi Weeks to use as a media log, hobby journal, thing like that. So I instead started to do like a summary of the day at the top here. So for example, I really like this page because I think this doodle of my dog is very cute. I have a 3-year-old Pomeranian named Harper, and she is the light of my life, and I adore her, and sometimes I draw her, and I just thought that this one in particular turned out pretty cute. But yeah, other than that, generally still the same layout. I moved my sleep and my water tracking to my daily section over here, but as you can see, in mid-April, I kind of gave up on using the planner. I even wrote down like, I'm sorry for neglecting this planner. I've been messing with Notion. So a lot of April is pretty empty. But moving forward into May, I had started to want to get back into paper planning because I realized that was just working better for me. So as a way to motivate myself to use a paper planner again, I tried out this little gamification trial thing where I would assign different XP for tasks that I had to do throughout the day. So 1 XP if it was a really easy task or a habit that I was really consistent at already, 2 XP if it required a little bit more thought, a little bit more effort, and then 5 XP if it was something that I knew I was going to put off or something that I was not looking forward to. And then I had a shop where I could purchase different rewards throughout the day. And you might notice that I put workout in the shop, and that is because I am somebody who will use exercising as a way to procrastinate doing work that I don't want to do. So I literally had to put working out in the shop to be like, no, 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 you have to get a certain amount of stuff done before you can work out, and then you can enjoy your exercise. So that's why I did that. And I don't do this very often, but I do think it's a fun way to kind of motivate yourself to use your planner if you're going through a little bit of a slump, or if you are someone like me who enjoys video games and want to try out gamification. I did enjoy this method when I did use it for a little bit. And this is just another example of me using that gamification where I use symbols to represent the different amounts of XP, and I just kept an XP bank at the top, had my dailies, had my tasks for the day, and the shop again. So just another example of the same thing. And you can see at this point I have completely dropped off of tracking my time, so I'm not even using the timeline on the side here anymore. I wasn't really journaling at this point. I was only using about half the page on most days. Jumping ahead into June, that is still the case where sometimes I would draw something like this gas station tube guy, or that I was CEO of Headache Central this day, but for the most part, my actual productivity use of this planner stopped at about the halfway point of the page. I bring that up because it will become relevant in a little bit here, but I just wanted to show off this page because it's my favorite page in the whole planner the day that I got a Switch 2, because if you don't know, it has been kind of a nightmare to get your hands on a Switch 2 if you didn't get one on launch day. So took a lot of me calling around and visiting different stores, but I got one and I was so excited about it. And I pasted in my Mario Kart code and just wrote a little bit about how I played Mario Kart and it was so fun. I also did a little sketch that my glues were sore before I got the Switch 2, so that seems a little out of place, but that's fine. And this page also makes me laugh because when I bought my Switch 2, multiple employees were like, oh, are you buying this for your kids? And I'm not somebody who has kids, so I just had to sit there and look them in the eye and be like, no, I'm buying it for myself. So that's just a fun memory that I have of buying the Switch 2. And then jumping ahead to the end of June, you can see I didn't even plan here because I was so busy with work. I was going through a crazy work sprint where there was a deadline that I had to hit and I was just going all day and didn't even have time to write out what I was supposed to do for the day. And then immediately after this is when I started to use this planner as solely a memory keeper. So you can see I journaled a little bit about my first tornado experience ever, and all the pages after this are just journaling, which is not the point of this video, so I won't be sharing them. And just for transparency, I have moved into a Sterling Ink Common Planner. So I've been using this for about 2 weeks now. It's been working great for me. It's the same format as the Cousin, vertical, weekly, so I just wanted to make note of that. But I do love the Cousin as a functional planner. I believe I had really good luck with the Tomoe River paper. I've never experienced any bleed through, but I'm also not somebody who uses fountain pens, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. But yeah, love this planner as a functional planner. No complaints there. And I will also say I don't use the back pages at all. These are all completely blank because even if I put anything back here, I would forget about it and never think to flip to it again. So just wanted to say that. And from here, I will move on to my work planner. So here is my work planner, the adorable Paddington Weeks. So cute. And I'll do the same thing with this where I work from front to back. So again, don't do anything with the front pages here. Don't do anything with the yearly calendar. I attempted to use the yearly index as a way to track how long certain projects were taking me, but I only did that for about a month until I decided it was not really serving me. And I haven't thought of another use for these pages yet. Maybe I will in the future, but if I don't, then I'm not too stressed about it. Moving into the monthlies, I first started using them again as a way to track how long projects were taking. So I've censored it up here, but I would write the title of the project, assign a color to it, and then draw a line across the bottom of every day as long as that project went on for. And I would color a day gray if I didn't work that day, and then write the reason why I didn't work that day over top. So sometimes I had rest days. Most people would call those weekends, but sometimes I don't take those. Sometimes I couldn't work due to migraines. Sometimes I would have to take a day off to do stuff around my apartment, stuff like that. And then also at the bottom here, I did a little graph chart for how many hours a day I was spending on each project. And I only did this for February because it took a lot of time And looking back, I'm like, I guess it's fun to look at, but it was just more trouble than it was worth to me. And more recently in the monthlies, instead of marking down the duration of a project, I've just been marking every day that I worked on a project with a coordinating color. And then I also mark certain things for certain videos. Like if I start a project that month, I'll write down the start date, I'll write down the date that the video is posted. If there's different deadlines, I'll write those down. So that's all I use the monthlies for. Not very exciting, but functional. So that's the whole point. And then as far as the actual weeklies go, at the start of the year, I used the whole left page to track hours that I was spending on different projects. So I had a column for work, a column for personal projects, and then a column for all of the hours total that I spent that day, either working for somebody else or working on my own personal projects. And on the right here, I would, at the top, put the projects I was working on, and then do an Alistair method running task list for the week, and just write down all of the tasks I needed to get done at some point that week. Again, I'm not really someone who usually has to get things done on a certain day. They just need to get done by the deadline. So the Alistair method works the best for me, just so I can get an overview of the week ahead, but not have to rewrite things every single day if I don't get around to them. And then this page is a great example of why I love using the weeks as a work planner specifically. As you can see here, I have some progress bars and some color coding. So I would assign a color to each day of the week, and I just do that in rainbow order. So Monday's red, Tuesday's orange, so on and so forth. And then as a video editor, I have to sort through dozens of hours of footage for videos oftentimes, and that can feel like I'm making absolutely no progress at the end of the day just because there's so much work ahead of me. So I started doing these progress bars where each box will represent a different amount of footage. So I don't have a key here because I've been using the same system for years. But for example, for a rough version 1 of a video, which is like the very first pass that I do, each box will represent 15 minutes of unedited footage. So for example, all of these boxes here represent a little bit over 8 hours of footage, and I would color in boxes accordingly to what I did that day. So gray means it was done previously to the current week, and then everything that I colored red here is footage that I got through on Monday. Orange is Tuesday, you get the idea. And I am obsessed with using progress bars like this. I am just such a visual person, and this is so helpful for me to feel like I'm making headway in a project when I look at the timeline and I still have 3 hours of footage in front of me. And this page is another example of a progress bar, just in a slightly different format. I have had to censor certain things, but basically this video, I had to edit 9 different perspectives. So I've listed the 9 different people along the side here. And instead of each box representing a specific amount of time in the footage, I just wrote down different scenes, which I've abbreviated here. But I could tell on Monday, I edited all of S3 for all 9 different people. On Tuesday, I edited all of C1 for all 9 different people, so on and so forth. So still a kind of progress bar, but just in a slightly different way, because this project was so much to get through. I needed some sort of organization to, again, feel like I was making any sort of progress. And then flipping to the current week, the only change that I really made is that instead of the left page only being used for hours, I still have a column to keep track of my work hours, but I've also started writing down day-specific tasks on the side here as well. So for example, I had a meeting on this day, which honestly does not happen very often for me. I'll maybe have 1 meeting a month, which I know probably sounds insane to some people, but yeah, I wrote that down here. I'm still using the same exact color coding system, still using progress bars. It's just been a system that has worked so well for me that, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I've just been keeping on with that for most of the year. And that's how my weeklies are looking. So I'm just gonna flip to the back note pages from here. And so I haven't gotten very far into using the notes pages, but at the start of the year, I was keeping track of my hours, which just took forever. And again, I wasn't finding very helpful because it's kind of fun to look at, but beyond that, I wasn't really seeing a benefit to it. So I had to come up with another idea for what I was going to use these note pages for. And so I started doing these kind of project dashboards. So I'll have a little mini calendar off to the side here and write down important dates, like when I started a project, if somebody that I need to contact is not going to be available, things like that. And then I had a Gantt style kind of chart here to mark when I was doing certain things, just so I could look at all of the work that I had ahead of me and keep that in mind when deadlines were coming up. And I didn't see this page through to the end of the project because it was such a sprint at the end. But this served me really well for the beginning of the project, and I really like this idea and this use of these back pages because it is nice to just have one central hub of info for the project. So if I needed to write down any specific notes, or like under here, I have the payment information for the project. And then another way that I use these pages is just for brain dump, essentially. For this video, I was just having a really hard time getting the pacing down. So I literally watched through the video and wrote down every single scene, beat by beat, of like different jokes that were happening, different things that were progressing the story of the video, and just wrote them all down so I could get them out of my head and look at them and be like, okay, this is feeling repetitive. This bit goes on for too long. Maybe I should move this bit somewhere else. So yeah, it's not pretty, but it's very helpful for me. And that's just about everything that I have to show off for today. So yeah, that's been my system for my functional planners for the first half of 2025. And the only reason I did move into a Sterling Ink Common Planner is because I felt like I've been needing more flexibility with the undated back pages instead of the dated dailies that the Cousin has. But other than that, very happy with this system. I hope that this video was interesting to watch or inspiring if you're also a functional planner. Thank you so very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.